Hey guys, I am the Tuna427, and this is my review and final thoughts of Batman the Killing Joke, the animated adaptation of the 1988 graphic novel written by Alan Moore. So we're going to just jump right into it. I'm about 14 hours off seeing it. I saw the special Fathom event here in my local town last evening, and I've had some time to really think about it, to really think about the dynamic of the movie, do a little bit more research on the novel itself, so I have a little bit more basis on why they did what they did and the direction that they took with the film. And I will also be putting up some raw footage of initial reactions, not only from myself, um, but from my better half and beautiful life partner. She will give you her perspective, which is a very unbiased perspective because she has um, no loyalty to the animated series from the 90s because she really didn't watch it. And she's not a Batman fanboy like I would consider myself. Now, I'm not a hardcore fanboy, but um, Batman is my favorite superhero um, consistently. And it wasn't until really the reemergence of what Marvel's doing with Deadpool that anything has even been able to um, really challenge that role. Now, I tend, as a whole, lean towards the Marvel side. However, nobody, in my opinion, is better than Batman. So, with that being said, let's jump right into it. I'm going to talk about the positives. I'm going to talk about the not so positives. Kind of give you my final thoughts. Um, no spoilers. I'll try and go as much detail as I can without giving any spoilers away. I don't want my perspective or my view or my opinion to set an expectation for those of you who are going to see the film. Because while everybody does have their own opinion, I know when there's a lot of hype and things along those lines, be it positive or negative, it sometimes can affect how you receive and enjoy the film. So, with that being said, let's jump right into the positives. Um, and actually, before I jump into the positives, give you a little bit of backstory for those of you who are not familiar with The Killing Joke, or the synopsis or storyline of The Killing Joke. Um, just people in general who are fans of Batman. Basically, the storyline goes in a roundabout way. Um, First half of the film kind of follows Batgirl around. Um, from her perspective, unfolds her story a little bit. Then we transition from that point. They reintroduce the Joker because there are a few nuances and things along those lines that kind of tie these stories together from Batgirl's side, and then obviously when they introduce the Joker. Now, with that being said, I knew nothing about the film. All I knew is that I loved the animated series from the 90s because that was my youth. I love Mark Hamill as the Joker, and the movie was rated R. Those were the only three things, excuse me, four things, and that Batgirl was somehow involved in the film. Those were the only things that I knew about this film going into it. So I was very excited that we were getting a rated R animated style series from the 90s, which I love. Mark Hamill was the Joker. My expectations for this film were exceedingly high. Very, very high. I thought this film was going to be fantastic. And not that it wasn't, but I feel that it did fall short a little bit, and we'll get into that here in a few minutes. But the point is I knew nothing about it. Okay, so I went into this just as a fanboy, watching a fanboy of Batman. I hate the term fanboy, and I've used it about God knows how many times already, but I digress. Point is I was a fan of Batman, or I am a fan of Batman, and I went into the film just being a fan of Batman and the animated series, and had playing the the Arkham video games and Mark Hamill as the Joker. I was it just reiterated my excitement. So let's talk about the positives. Okay, first and foremost, Mark Hamill as the Joker, as expected, was phenomenal. He was a phenomenal, phenomenal Joker, in my opinion. Aside from Heath Ledger's performance, obviously in the live-action film, Mark Hamill, in my opinion, is arguably one of the best Jokers as far as his voice and the way he captures the character and things along those lines. Now, I know there's going to be a lot of people out there who's going to say, what about Jack Nicholson or the classic guys who, um, who like the Bam Pow Smash Joker. But overall, as far as voiceovers go, I think Mark Hamill, and I think a lot of people would agree that Mark Hamill is, as far as voiceover Batman's, uh, or excuse me, a voiceover Jokers, he is the best. Um, Moving on from that, I think that this film does a really, really good job of humanizing all of the characters. And I think that that was the point here, to really give you a perspective beyond just crime fighting and detective work and cool gadgets and shit like that. I really feel like they went above and beyond to try and humanize every single character um, that was involved, at least the main characters in the film. Um, Now, some would argue that they do a little bit better job humanizing some characters rather than others, but I'll leave that for you guys to decide. Um, there are some really good Jokerisms, is what I like to call it. There's a lot of good um, pieces, little tidbits, little monologues, things along those lines that the Joker says and acts out that really make this movie what it is. And Mark Hamill and that laugh that he just somehow captures is just amazing. Um, the music was very, very good. Um, there is a musical number in the film, not to give too much away. There is a little musical number, which is kind of creepy, a little bit dark. But overall, I thought it was well done. Um, at first, I felt it was a little bit out of place. However, looking back on it, it ended up working out pretty well, I feel. Um, Animation, if you're a fan of the style of animation from the 90s, I feel like the animation style was spot on. And if you guys aren't familiar with the 90s um, Batman cartoons, those are the ones you watched at 2:30, 3 o'clock when you got home from school, popped you a little high-C ecto cooler juice box, and it was the Batman with the he had the ridiculously long ass Batmobile, and they would run and they would look like they're moving so slow, but they would cover so much ground. That animation, very, very good. Um, it really brought me back to my youth in that standpoint. Kevin Conroy as Batman, um, and I haven't really mentioned that because really Joker steals the show here, but Kevin Conroy as Batman, um, frankly, he was Kevin Conroy. Uh, and what I mean by that is, man, a few words. We got a couple of "Where is he?" in there, which I really appreciated. Um, I don't know if that was a nod to Christian Bale or not, but I really did enjoy that. I do feel that they do a good job of um, adding some really dark humor. Um, and it's kind of humor that you kind of got to pay attention to a little bit because it is a little bit on the intellectual side. You got to kind of know what they're referencing, things along those lines. But most people who will be watching this film are a little bit more mature, probably have a little bit more, or a little bit better grasp rather of the style, and should pick up on those pretty well, um, and enjoy that. Now we can call this what we want to call it. We could call it negative. We could call it the not so positive. Again, I don't want my personal opinions to affect your expectations. I'm just telling you what I saw in the film. And the not so good things that I saw, first and foremost, I don't feel that this movie earned an R rating. Um, I believe they used four cuss words, one time each. It was bitch, hell, ass, and goddamn, if those are even considered cuss words by today's standards. I feel like the R rating was probably a stretch, and the reason why they went ahead and gave it an R rating was to hype it up a little bit more. Because personally, for me, as I said in the beginning of the video, that I knew it was R rated, so that made me even more excited about it. Now, with that being said, there are some disturbing images um, that may be disturbing to some. I feel like because most of us are so desensitized with film and TV and real world events and video games, etc., that this will feel a little bit of a stretch for an R rating. There was supposed nudity. There's a little bit of underboob, maybe, but nothing too out there. And like I said, not to give anything too much away. There was a couple of scenes where some individuals were shot in the head, and they showed a little bit of blood spray out the side, things along those lines. But nothing that uh, would shock most people who are fans of any type of gore or anything along those lines. So that I feel like was a little bit of a stretch. I also feel like Batgirl's story, they kind of missed the mark on it a little bit. And truthfully, I feel like you kind of watch two films here. You have the first part, which is kind of narrated and pushed along by Batgirl. Um, and then you have the second part where they introduce and bring in the Joker, and not to, like I said, give too much away, but it feels like you're really watching two movies here, and there are little bitty nuances, um, or some, I guess I wouldn't call them little bitty, but there are smaller nuances that kind of tie both ends of the film together, the beginning end, obviously, and the ending end. Um, of the film, and I feel like they kind of missed the mark on that a little bit. They could have made it flow a little bit better, but it really does feel like you're watching two films, at least in my opinion. Um, Batgirl's story could have also been expanded on quite a bit. Now, they do a really good job, as I stated before, in humanizing a lot of these characters. Um, However, I feel like her story could have been, or her portion of the film, at least at the beginning, could have been um, a lot better. They had a lot of potential there with that, and I feel like they missed the mark on it a little bit. Um, and the last kind of negative thing per se would be the fact that we are both myself and Catherine feel it was a little bit anticlimactic. It feels like it's been done before so many times, and I understand kind of why they took the direction that they did because it was an adaptation, and from what I understand, they stuck very very close to the graphic novel, which a lot of fans would appreciate, and I appreciate that they do it as well. But overall, I felt it was a bit anticlimactic. I feel like it's been done before so many times, and in all fairness, the other side of that argument is this novel was written in 1988, before all of the live action films, before all of the adaptations and all of the things that we've kind of come to know, and even before the video games, um, before we've come to know all of these storylines with Batman. Um, so those are kind of my thoughts on it. Some final thoughts, kind of to wrap the whole thing up. Um, they could have pushed the envelope a little bit more with the R rating. Um, I really enjoyed the way that they humanized all of the characters. I really enjoyed the way they humanized, more specifically, the Joker and Batman. They missed the mark a little bit on the other characters, but they still did a decent job at least not letting them go. Um, but specifically, the Batman and Joker humanization was really good, and I think most of us can agree that the Joker is um, quite possibly the most insane comic book villain in history. Um, but I think a lot of us tend to forget that, you know, even though he's a lunatic and he's a madman and he's just a crazy fucking psychopath a lot of times, and this just laughing idiot a lot of other times, he is a man. He's not a mutant. He's not a an alien or anything along those lines. He's just a guy who went crazy. And there have been many adaptations on how the Joker became who he is. I think this film does a good job of kind of telling that backstory a little bit better and a little bit different than what a lot of us may be used to. And the same with Batman. You don't get a lot of backstory with Bruce Wayne and Batman. Um, obviously because that's all common knowledge for the most part at this point. But the way that they bring, and like I said, not to give too much away, but the way they end the film really does a good job of hammering home that these are just two men on opposite ends of the spectrum, um, really battling each other. Um, and it really expresses Batman's interest in trying to find some common ground, and expresses that he's not really interested in hurting the Joker. He really just wants to help him. And I might have already said too much with that. Um, but I don't mind the way the film ended. It ended pretty well. Um, they could have pushed the envelope a little bit anticlimactic. However, the overall film I feel like was done very well. Um, Animation, music, Mark Hamill, as stated previously and as expected, was phenomenal. Um, Let me know, guys, if you what you think, if you've seen it or you plan on seeing it, or if you're going to wait for the DVD release on August 2nd. Let me know in the comment section below what you think. Make sure and hit that subscribe button. Um, this is my first attempt at a review, um, so I apologize for jumping around a little bit. Tried to organize it as best I could. But with that being said, if you're still listening at this point, I greatly appreciate you going through and sticking with me this long. So, with that being said, if you plan on seeing it, what are your expectations? If you've already seen it, what were your expectations? And what are they now that what are your thoughts now that you've seen it? Let me know in the comment section below. Make sure and hit that subscribe button, throw a like on it. All the other little begging things that all the other YouTubers ask, I'm not too proud to ask you to do it as well. So, with that being said, I want to thank you guys very much for giving this a listen, and stay tuned because there'll be more to come.